Ladies, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room where people talked about you like you weren't there? Where they smiled at your face but dismissed everything about you the moment they thought you couldn't hear? Tonight, I want to tell you about a woman who lived that reality for 15 years. Everyone saw her as the perfect pharmaceutical executive's wife, quiet, supportive, always in the background, handling the computer stuff, while her husband shined at company parties. But one midnight, she received 5 photographs that her husband's mistress thought would destroy her world. 5 pictures designed to humiliate, to break her heart, to send her crawling away in shame. That mistress made one tiny miscalculation. She thought she was dealing with a naive suburban housewife. She was wrong, catastrophically, dangerously wrong. What happened next became the most significant espionage case in recent American history, and it all started with those 5 photographs that were supposed to break one woman's spirit. But here's the thing about underestimating the wrong woman. Sometimes the quiet ones are quiet for a reason. Sometimes they're watching, listening, and remembering everything. So grab your tea, settle in, because this story will remind you why you should never ever underestimate a woman who's been pushed too far. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as I watched my husband of 15 years accept yet another congratulatory handshake from his pharmaceutical colleagues. The annual MedTech Solutions Gala was in full swing at the Four Seasons in downtown Austin, and Mike Thompson was basking in the glory of his promotion to Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. From across the elegantly appointed ballroom, I could see him gesturing expansively, his silver hair catching the crystal chandelier light as he regaled a circle of executives with what I assumed was another tale of his latest sales triumph. "Your husband certainly knows how to work a room," commented Patricia Williams, the wife of MedTech's chief financial officer, as she joined me near the silent auction display. Her tone carried that particular blend of admiration and subtle competitiveness that characterized most conversations among the pharmaceutical wives' circle. I smiled graciously, the expression as practiced as a diplomat's handshake after decades of corporate social events. Mike has always been gifted at building relationships. I replied, watching as he threw his head back in laughter at something one of the younger sales directors had said. "It's what makes him so successful." What I didn't say, what none of these perfectly coiffed women in their designer gowns could possibly understand, was that relationship building had also made Mike dangerously careless. But then again, they all saw exactly what I had trained them to see over the years. Jennifer Thompson, the quietly supportive wife who managed the household technology and occasionally provided computer help when someone's laptop misbehaved. "I don't know how you do it," Patricia continued, adjusting her pearl necklace as she spoke. "Managing everything at home while Mike travels so much. And with your little computer consulting business on top of it all, you're absolutely remarkable." My little computer consulting business. If only she knew that cybersecurity solutions commanded 7-figure contracts with Fortune 500 companies and maintained active security clearances with agencies whose names never appeared in public directories. If only any of them knew that the woman they dismissed as Mike's tech-savvy housewife had spent the better part of 2 decades building one of the most sophisticated digital forensics capabilities in the private sector. But that was precisely the point. In my line of work, anonymity was not just preferable, it was essential. The moment people understood what I actually did for a living, everything changed. Conversations became guarded. Invitations dwindled. Husbands started wondering what their wives might be hiding in their browsers. The suburban invisibility I had cultivated so carefully was my greatest professional asset. "You're too kind," I murmured to Patricia, then excused myself to refresh my drink and escape another round of well-meaning but thoroughly patronizing small talk about my adorable little tech hobby. Okay, boss. I made my way toward the bar. I caught fragments of Mike's latest story, something about closing a particularly challenging deal with a hospital system in Dallas. His voice carried that familiar note of barely contained pride that had once charmed me, but now felt as familiar and unremarkable as the hum of the air conditioning. "The key," Mike was saying to his audience of admirers, "is understanding that every client has unique needs, unique vulnerabilities. You have to know exactly which buttons to push and when." The metaphor struck me as oddly appropriate, though not in the way he intended. I had met Mike 17 years ago at a cybersecurity conference in San Antonio, back when I was still transitioning from my FBI years into private consulting. He had approached me after my presentation on advanced persistent threat detection, claiming to be fascinated by the intersection of technology and business strategy. At the time, his interest had seemed genuine, even refreshing. Most pharmaceutical executives I encountered viewed cybersecurity as a necessary evil, something to be outsourced and forgotten. Mike appeared different, curious, engaged, asking thoughtful questions about how digital forensics could protect intellectual property and maintain competitive advantages. Our courtship had unfolded against the backdrop of Austin's rapidly expanding tech scene, long conversations over coffee about the evolving landscape of corporate espionage and the critical importance of protecting sensitive data in an increasingly connected world. Mike's questions about my work had been detailed and specific, demonstrating what I interpreted as intellectual curiosity about a field far removed from his pharmaceutical sales background. Looking back now with the clarity that only comes from years of analyzing deception patterns in my professional life, I could see how carefully those early conversations had been orchestrated. Mike hadn't been learning about cybersecurity out of romantic interest or intellectual curiosity. He had been conducting reconnaissance, but I was getting ahead of myself. That night at the MedTech Gala, standing in a ballroom full of pharmaceutical executives and their perfectly groomed wives, I was still playing the role I had perfected over 15 years of marriage, Jennifer Thompson, the quietly competent wife who handled all the computer stuff, while her dynamic husband conquered the business world. The bartender, a young man who looked barely old enough to legally serve alcohol, smiled as I approached. "What can I get you, ma'am?" "Gin and tonic, please. Top shelf gin light on the tonic." I had learned long ago that specific drink orders commanded more respect than wine spritzers or cosmopolitans, especially from bartenders who spent their evenings serving pharmaceutical executives and their wives. As he prepared my drink with practiced efficiency, I found myself studying the reflection in the mirror behind the bar. At 52, I had maintained the kind of understated elegance that served me well in both my professional and social roles. My auburn hair was pulled back in a simple chignon that could transition seamlessly from boardroom presentations to country club luncheons. The navy blue dress I wore tonight was expensive enough to fit in among the pharmaceutical elite, but conservative enough to avoid drawing unwanted attention. I had become a master of calculated invisibility, and tonight was no exception. Jennifer. The voice belonged to Ashley Chen, one of MedTech's rising marketing executives. She approached the bar with the kind of confident stride that suggested she owned whatever room she entered. At 34, Ashley represented everything the pharmaceutical industry valued in its younger employees: ambitious, technologically savvy, and utterly committed to advancing her career at any cost. "Ashley, good to see you," I replied, accepting my drink from the bartender with a smile. "Congratulations on the Morrison account. Mike mentioned you played a crucial role in closing that deal." Ashley's eyes lit up with the particular glow that came from having one's professional accomplishments acknowledged by the spouse of his senior executive. "Your husband is too generous," she said, though her tone suggested she believed every word of Mike's praise was well-deserved. "Mike has been an incredible mentor. I've learned so much from watching how he approaches client relationships." There was something in the way she said "watching how he approaches" that made me pause, though I couldn't quite identify why. A subtle emphasis perhaps, or a slightly longer pause than natural conversation would require. In my professional life, I had trained myself to notice such micro-expressions and verbal tells. They often preceded the discovery of significant security breaches or fraudulent activity. "I'm sure Mike appreciates having such a dedicated colleague," I replied, carefully studying Ashley's face as she responded. "He's been so supportive of my career development and development." Ashley continued, her voice taking on an almost confessional tone. "Just last week, he suggested I attend the Pharmaceutical Innovation Conference in San Francisco. Said it would be perfect for someone with my background and ambitions." Again, that slight emphasis. And something else, a warmth in her voice when she mentioned Mike's name that seemed to extend beyond normal professional gratitude. I filed the observation away, along with the mental note that Mike had never mentioned suggesting conference attendance for any of his other junior colleagues. "That sounds like a wonderful opportunity," I said, maintaining my expression of polite interest while my mind began processing patterns and possibilities with the same systematic approach I used when analyzing potentially compromised network traffic. Our conversation was interrupted by Mike himself, who appeared at my elbow with the kind of territorial possessiveness that had become more pronounced over the past year. "Jennifer, darling, I see you've been talking with Ashley." His hand found the small of my back, a gesture that appeared affectionate but felt oddly performative. "Ashley was just telling me about the San Francisco conference." I replied, watching as something flickered across both their faces, too quickly to interpret, but present nonetheless. "Ah, yes," Mike said, his voice carrying that slightly forced cheerfulness that I had learned to recognize over years of marriage. "Ashley has been doing exceptional work lately. She deserves every opportunity for professional growth." The way he said exceptional work struck me as oddly formal, especially given the casual nature of the conversation. But before I could analyze the interaction further, Patricia Williams reappeared at my side, effectively ending any possibility of deeper observation. "Jennifer, you simply must settle a debate for us," Patricia announced with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested the debate was anything but serious. "Margaret insists that your security system is what prevented the break-ins in Westlake Hills last month, but I told her that was probably just coincidence." I felt Mike's hand tighten slightly against my back, a reaction so subtle that anyone else would have missed it entirely. But I had spent years learning to read the micro-expressions and unconscious responses that revealed when someone was concealing information. "Well," I said carefully, "we do have a fairly comprehensive home security setup. Mike worried about all his travel leaving me alone, so we invested in some upgraded systems." The explanation was true enough, though it omitted the fact that our home security setup included military-grade surveillance equipment and network monitoring tools that would have impressed most federal agencies. "See," Patricia said triumphantly, "I knew you had to have something special. You're always so prepared for everything." The conversation continued for several more minutes, but my attention had shifted to analyzing the evening's social dynamics with the same methodical approach I use for corporate security assessments. Mike's behavior around Ashley, Ashley's carefully worded comments about their professional relationship, the subtle tension I sensed whenever certain topics arose. By the time we made our excuses and headed home to our house in the Westlake Hills, I had accumulated enough observational data to justify a more systematic investigation. Not because I suspected marital infidelity, that possibility had occurred to me, of course, but it seemed almost mundane compared to the other patterns I was beginning to recognize. The drive home passed in comfortable silence, Austin city lights giving way to the darker, more exclusive neighborhoods west of downtown. Mike seemed unusually quiet, occasionally glancing at his phone when he thought I wasn't watching. I found myself cataloging these behaviors the same way I would document suspicious network activity for a client. Our house sat on 2 acres of carefully landscaped grounds, a modern interpretation of traditional Texas architecture that had been featured in Austin Home and Living magazine 3 years earlier. The article had focused on the seamless integration of smart home technology with classic design elements, though the writer had no idea how sophisticated our smart home technology actually was. As we pulled into the circular driveway, the motion sensors activated a progression of landscape lighting that created the impression of a warm, welcoming family home. The reality was somewhat more complex. Those same motion sensors were connected to a comprehensive surveillance system that monitored and recorded all activity on our property. The decorative lighting contained multiple spectrum cameras capable of facial recognition and license plate reading. The charming Texas limestone exterior concealed a level of electronic security that would have been appropriate for a foreign embassy. "Successful evening," Mike commented as he turned off the engine, though something in his tone suggested the opposite. "Very successful." I agreed, though we were clearly measuring success by different criteria. Inside, Mike headed directly to his home office, claiming he needed to follow up on a few conversations from tonight, before bed. This had become his routine over the past several months, immediate retreat to his office after social events, usually accompanied by phone calls that he claimed were work-related, but often lasted well into the night. I made my way to my own office, a space that Mike in our social circle assumed was where I handled my little computer consulting business. The reality was that this room contained some of the most sophisticated digital forensics equipment available outside of government facilities. The walls were lined with servers, monitoring stations, and analysis tools that allowed me to conduct the kind of deep network investigation that had made cybersecurity solutions one of the most sought-after firms in the country. As I settled into my chair and began powering up the systems, I found myself thinking about Ashley Chen's comments and Mike's subtle reactions throughout the evening. In my professional experience, when patterns started emerging in seemingly unrelated data points, it usually meant someone was working very hard to hide something significant. I had spent my career investigating corporate espionage, intellectual property theft, and various forms of digital deception. I knew how to recognize when someone was conducting activities they didn't want discovered. I understood the behavioral patterns that preceded major security breaches. And I was beginning to suspect that my own home might be the site of exactly the kind of operation I was paid to detect and prevent. The thought should have been devastating. Instead, I felt the familiar rush of analytical excitement that came with beginning a new investigation. Whatever Mike and Ashley might be concealing, they had made a critical error in assuming that the woman they saw as a peripheral figure in their professional world lacked the capabilities to discover their activities. My computer screens flickered to life, displaying the network monitoring systems that I maintained as part of my standard home security protocols. What appeared on those screens made me sit forward with the sharp attention of a professional who had just discovered the first evidence of a significant security breach. Over the past 6 months, our home network had been experiencing data usage patterns that were completely inconsistent with normal household activity. Large file transfers during specific time windows. Multiple device connections that I couldn't immediately identify. Upload activities that suggested someone was systematically backing up or sharing significant amounts of data. The pattern was subtle enough that most people would never notice it. But I wasn't most people. I was someone who had spent years learning to recognize exactly these kinds of anomalies when they appeared in corporate networks. The difference was that this time the compromised system wasn't owned by a Fortune 500 company concerned about intellectual property theft. This time the compromised system was my own home. As I began implementing the same investigative protocols I used for my most sensitive corporate clients, I realized that Ashley Chen's carefully worded comments about Mike's mentorship might have been more significant than I had initially understood, and Mike's increasingly secretive behavior over the past months might represent something far more serious than simple marital dissatisfaction. I opened a new encrypted folder on my secure server and labeled it Thompson Investigation Preliminary Assessment. Then I began the systematic process of documenting everything I had observed, every anomaly I had detected, and every pattern that suggested my husband and his promising young colleague might be engaged in activities that extended well beyond their official pharmaceutical sales duties. Whatever they were hiding, they had made the mistake of conducting their activities under the observation of someone whose entire career had been built on detecting sophisticated deception and documenting digital evidence with courtroom-quality precision. The investigation was just beginning, but I already knew one thing with absolute certainty: they had severely underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. As the clock on my computer screen showed 1:17 a.m., I heard Mike's office door close and his footsteps on the stairs. His phone calls had lasted nearly 3 hours, far longer than any legitimate business conversation would require. I quickly minimized my analysis windows and activated the screen that displayed my little computer consulting business project files. By the time Mike appeared in my doorway, I was every inch the dedicated wife who stayed up late working on client websites and basic security assessments. "Still working?" he asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly interested in the answer. "Just finishing up a project for the Morrison Group," I replied, referencing a real client whose name I knew he would recognize from Ashley's recent success story. Their network security assessment took longer than expected. Mike nodded absently, already turning away. "Don't stay up too much longer. We have the charity luncheon tomorrow, remember?" "Of course," I said. "I'll be up shortly." As his footsteps receded down the hallway, I reopened my investigation files and continued documenting the digital evidence that would soon reveal exactly what my husband and Ashley Chen had been hiding from me. They thought they were conducting a sophisticated operation under the nose of someone they considered technologically naive, Instead, they were creating a comprehensive digital record of their activities under the surveillance of someone who specialized in exactly this kind of investigation. The midnight message that would change everything was still 2 weeks away, but the real investigation had already begun. The morning after the MedTech Gala, I woke to the sound of Mike's shower running in the familiar routine that had governed our mornings for 15 years. Coffee brewing automatically at 6:30, the Austin American statesman delivered to our front step, and the gentle hum of our home's sophisticated systems maintaining the perfect environment for what everyone assumed was a typical suburban executive household. But as I lay in our king-size bed, watching the early morning light filter through the custom window treatments I had selected 3 years ago, I knew that nothing about our household was typical anymore. The data patterns I had discovered the night before suggested activities that went far beyond marital infidelity into territory that could potentially compromise not just our marriage, but national security interests that extended well beyond our Westlake Hills neighborhood. Mike emerged from the bathroom with a towel around his waist, his silver hair still damp and his face wearing the expression of satisfied confidence that had characterized most of our recent mornings. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, leaning down to kiss my forehead with the casual affection of a man who believed his secrets were perfectly safe. "Good morning," I replied, managing the warm smile that had become as automatic as breathing after years of corporate social events and pharmaceutical industry gatherings. "How did your calls go last night? You seem to be working quite late." "Oh, you know how it is," Mike said with a dismissive wave as he moved toward his walk-in closet. "The Morrison account is generating follow-up opportunities, and Ashley had some questions about the implementation timeline. Nothing that couldn't wait, but you know how eager she is to prove herself." The casual mention of Ashley's name in connection with late-night phone calls sent a familiar chill of analytical alertness through my system. In my professional experience, when people volunteered information that hadn't been specifically requested, they were usually working to establish alibis for activities they preferred to keep hidden. "That's thoughtful of you to be so available for mentoring," I said carefully, watching his reflection in the closet mirror as he selected his tie for the day. "Ashley certainly seems appreciative of your guidance." Mike's hand paused for just a fraction of a second longer than natural before pulling a navy silk tie from the rack. "She's a bright young woman with a lot of potential. The pharmaceutical industry needs more people like her, ambitious, technically skilled, willing to think outside traditional boundaries." The phrase "think outside traditional boundaries" struck me as oddly specific, particularly given that Ashley's role as a marketing coordinator should have been fairly well defined within traditional boundaries. But I filed the observation away and maintained my expression of supportive interest. "I'm sure MedTech is lucky to have both of you working so well together," I said, then shifted the conversation towards safer ground. "What time is the charity luncheon today? I want to make sure I'm ready." "Noon at the Four Seasons," Mike replied, his tone returning to its normal warmth now that we had moved away from the subject of Ashley Chen. "Senator Morrison will be speaking about healthcare innovation initiatives. Should be good for business relationships." As Mike finished dressing and headed downstairs for his usual breakfast of steel-cut oats and black coffee, I remained in bed for several additional minutes processing the morning's conversation through the analytical framework I use for security assessments. Every detail, the timing of his phone calls, the specific mention of Ashley's questions, the unusual phrasing about thinking outside boundaries would be documented and cross-referenced with other behavioral patterns as my investigation progressed. By 7:30, Mike had left for the office, and I had the house to myself for what I knew would be the first of many intensive investigation sessions. The charity luncheon wouldn't begin until noon, giving me nearly 4 hours to implement the kind of systematic digital forensics examination that had made my reputation in corporate security circles. I made my way to my home office, but instead of settling at the desk where I conducted my little computer consulting business, I moved to a section of the room that appeared to be decorative built-in shelving. What looked like leather-bound volumes of classic literature were actually sophisticated monitoring equipment, disguised to blend seamlessly with the traditional decor Mike preferred. The spine labeled Pride and Prejudice concealed a military-grade network analysis system. War and Peace contained encrypted storage drives with petabytes of capacity. Gone with the Wind housed signal intelligence equipment that could intercept and analyze digital communications across multiple platforms. This was the real nerve center of cybersecurity solutions hidden in plain sight within a home office that Mike had helped me design without ever understanding its true purpose. The books he occasionally pulled from these shelves to demonstrate his intellectual interest to dinner guests were real enough, but they represented only a fraction of what the built-in system actually contained. As I activated the various monitoring systems, my computer screens filled with data that told a story far more complex than simple marital infidelity. The network analysis from the previous 6 months revealed patterns that made my pulse quicken with the recognition that comes from years of investigating sophisticated security breaches. The anomalous data transfers I had noticed weren't random. They followed a precise schedule that correlated with Mike's travel calendar and my own professional commitments. Someone had been systematically accessing our home network during specific time windows when they could reasonably expect to avoid detection by anyone with advanced technical capabilities. More concerning was the discovery that these data transfers were bidirectional. Information wasn't just being uploaded from our network, significant amounts of data were being downloaded to devices that I couldn't immediately identify. The volume and frequency suggested systematic intelligence gathering rather than casual file sharing. I opened a new investigation file and began implementing the same protocols I used when Fortune 500 companies suspected internal data breaches. The first step was always to establish a comprehensive baseline of normal activity, then identify any deviations that might indicate unauthorized access or insider threats. Our home network was more sophisticated than most corporate environments, a necessity given the sensitive nature of my consulting work and the security clearances that required strict protocols for protecting classified information. Every device, every connection, every data transfer was logged and encrypted with military-grade security measures. What I discovered as I analyzed 6 months of network logs was a pattern of activity that suggested someone with considerable technical sophistication had been systematically penetrating our security measures. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated the depth and sophistication of the monitoring systems they were attempting to circumvent. The breakthrough came when I identified device signatures that corresponded to smartphones and laptops that weren't registered to our household accounts. Cross-referencing these signatures with our social calendar revealed that one particular device had been connecting to our network on dates that corresponded exactly with events where Mike and I had entertained medtech colleagues. The device signature matched an iPhone that had briefly connected to our guest network during a barbecue we had hosted for Mike's sales team in our backyard the previous summer. The owner of that device had been Ashley Chen. Once I had Ashley's device identifier, I could track every subsequent connection and correlate it with Mike's calendar entries and my own travel schedule. What emerged was a pattern of systematic access that had been occurring an average of 3 times per week for the past 6 months, always during business hours when I was typically at client sites or industry conferences. But the most damaging discovery wasn't the frequency of Ashley's presence in our home. It was what she had been doing during those visits. The network logs showed that Ashley's device had been uploading high-resolution images and video files to cloud storage services during each visit. The file sizes and upload patterns suggested document photography and video recordings of sensitive materials. More troubling was evidence that her device had been accessing Mike's medtech company accounts through our home network, downloading client files and internal communications that she had no authorized access to. As a cybersecurity professional, I recognize this as a serious breach of corporate data security that could expose medtech to regulatory violations and potential lawsuits. The pharmaceutical industry was heavily regulated with strict protocols governing who could access client information and under what circumstances. Ashley's position as a marketing coordinator didn't provide authorization for the sales reports, client contact databases, and strategic planning documents that her device had been downloading from Mike's account. More concerning was the evidence that Mike had been sharing his corporate login credentials with someone who lacked the security clearances necessary to access sensitive pharmaceutical industry information. But as I delved deeper into the data analysis, a more disturbing pattern began to emerge. Ashley's device hadn't just been accessing Mike's routine business files. The download log showed systematic collection of information related to my own consulting work, including project files that contained details about my government clients and the security assessments I conducted for defense contractors. Someone had been using our home network to gather intelligence about cybersecurity operations that extended far beyond MedTech's pharmaceutical business into areas that could affect national security. The emotional impact of these discoveries was unlike anything I had experienced in my professional career. When I investigated corporate data breaches for clients, the betrayal was abstract, nameless employees violating company policies for personal gain. This investigation was revealing that my own husband had been facilitating systematic theft of information that could compromise not just his employer's business interests, but potentially my own client's national security operations. I forced myself to maintain the analytical detachment that had made me successful in my field, documenting each piece of evidence with the same methodical precision I used for corporate clients. But underneath the professional composure, I was processing the realization that my marriage had been systematically exploited for what appeared to be sophisticated industrial espionage. The next phase of the investigation required expanding beyond network analysis to include financial records, communication intercepts, and behavioral surveillance. If Ashley and Mike were engaged in systematic data theft, there would be additional evidence in their financial transactions, travel patterns, and digital communications. I began by accessing our joint financial accounts through the secure banking portals that Mike assumed I used only for household budget management. What I discovered immediately explained how they had been funding their activities while avoiding detection through normal spending patterns. Over the past 8 months, Mike had been making cash withdrawals that totaled nearly $50,000, always in amounts just below the reporting thresholds that would trigger bank security protocols. The withdrawals had been made from ATMs near locations that corresponded with his claimed business travel, creating the appearance of legitimate expense reimbursements. But cross-referencing these withdrawals with his actual expense reports revealed discrepancies that suggested the cash was being used for activities that Mike preferred to keep separate from his official business travel. The timing of the withdrawals also corresponded with periods when Ashley's device showed increased activity on our home network. The credit card records revealed additional concerning patterns. Mike had been making charges for hotel rooms, restaurants, and travel that didn't appear on any of his official business itineraries. More troubling were charges for technology equipment and services that had no apparent connection to his pharmaceutical sales duties. These purchases included encrypted communication devices, secure cloud storage subscriptions, and digital privacy tools that suggested Mike and Ashley were aware that their activities could be subject to surveillance and were taking steps to avoid detection. The sophistication of their operational security measures indicated that their activities went far beyond casual document sharing or simple romantic encounters. They were operating with the kind of counterintelligence consciousness that suggested either professional training in corporate espionage or guidance from someone with expertise in evading digital surveillance. As I compiled this financial evidence, I began implementing communication intercepts that would allow me to monitor their phone calls, text messages, and email exchanges. This required activating capabilities that I typically use only for the most sensitive government consulting projects, but the scope of the apparent security breach justified extraordinary measures. The communication monitoring systems revealed conversations that confirmed my worst suspicions about the nature of their relationship and its implications for both corporate and national security. Mike and Ashley weren't just conducting a romantic affair, they were systematically coordinating the theft of sensitive information from both MedTech and my own consulting clients. Their text messages included detailed discussions of which documents to target, how to avoid detection by security systems, and strategies for monetizing the intelligence they were gathering. More damaging were conversations that revealed Ashley had connections to individuals and organizations that raised significant counterintelligence concerns. Her communications referenced meetings with foreign nationals working in technology industries, attendance at conferences sponsored by organizations with known connections to hostile intelligence services, and financial relationships with companies that had been investigated for potential espionage activities. The scope of the potential security breach was becoming clear. Mike and Ashley appeared to be operating as part of a larger intelligence network targeting American pharmaceutical and cybersecurity capabilities for foreign exploitation. As I processed this information, I realized that what had begun as suspicions about marital infidelity had evolved into the discovery of what could be one of the most significant foreign intelligence operations targeting American industry and government interests in recent years. The personal betrayal was devastating, but the professional implications were even more serious. If foreign intelligence services had been using my marriage to gather information about American cybersecurity operations and defense contractor projects, the damage to national security could be catastrophic. I had spent my career protecting sensitive information from exactly this kind of exploitation. Now I was discovering that my own home had been the site of systematic intelligence gathering that could have compromised some of the most sensitive cybersecurity operations in the American government and defense establishment. The investigation was no longer just about saving my marriage or protecting my personal interests. It had become a matter of national security that would require coordination with federal law enforcement agencies and counterintelligence operations. But first, I needed to gather enough evidence to support prosecutions that could dismantle the entire intelligence network that Mike and Ashley appeared to be supporting. That would require weeks of additional investigation, careful coordination with federal agencies, and the kind of strategic planning that had made my reputation in the cybersecurity field. As I prepared to implement the next phase of evidence gathering, I realized that Mike and Ashley had made a critical error in targeting someone with my background and capabilities. They had assumed they were exploiting a suburban housewife with basic computer skills. Instead, they had been conducting their operation under the surveillance of someone who specialized in exactly the kind of investigation that would document their activities with courtroom-quality evidence and federal law enforcement cooperation. The real investigation was just beginning, but I already knew that they had severely underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. 3 weeks into my investigation, I had compiled enough evidence to support federal charges against both Mike and Ashley for corporate espionage, theft of classified information, and potential violations of national security laws. But as I sat in my home office at 2:30 on a Tuesday morning, analyzing the latest intercepts from their communication devices, I realized that the scope of their operation was far more extensive than I had initially understood. The breakthrough had come from a seemingly routine text message exchange between Ashley and an unknown contact using encrypted messaging services. Most people would have dismissed it as workplace gossip or personal conversation. But my experience with foreign intelligence operations had taught me to recognize the verbal patterns and operational security measures that characterize professional espionage communications. Ashley wasn't just stealing information for personal gain or even simple corporate advantage. She was fulfilling specific intelligence requirements that had been developed by foreign entities with sophisticated knowledge of American cybersecurity capabilities and defense contractor operations. The evidence suggested that my marriage to Mike had been targeted from the very beginning as a long-term penetration strategy designed to exploit my security clearances and access to classified government projects. What I had believed was a romantic relationship that developed into a successful partnership was actually a 15-year intelligence operation that had been systematically compromising American national security interests. The emotional impact of this realization required the kind of compartmentalization skills I had developed during my FBI years when investigating cases that involved personal betrayal and professional duty. But even with my training in managing complex investigations, discovering that my entire adult life had been essentially a foreign intelligence operation was devastating in ways that no professional experience could have prepared me for. I forced myself to focus on the investigative protocols that had made my reputation in the cybersecurity field. Personal emotions could be processed later. Right now, I needed to document evidence that could protect other potential targets and prevent further damage to national security. The communication intercepts revealed that Ashley had been reporting regularly to foreign intelligence handlers through secure channels that demonstrated professional training in operational security and counterintelligence measures. Her reports included detailed assessments of my professional activities, security clearances, and access to classified projects that had been ongoing throughout our marriage. More troubling was evidence that foreign intelligence services had been using information obtained through Ashley and Mike to target other cybersecurity professionals and defense contractors with similar access to sensitive projects. The intelligence network they were supporting appeared to be conducting systematic penetration of American cybersecurity capabilities through recruitment of assets positioned within government agencies and defense contracting organizations. But the most personally devastating discovery was that Mike had been actively working to expand my consulting relationships with government agencies and defense contractors, specifically to provide Ashley with access to more valuable intelligence. The career guidance he had provided over the years, suggesting specific clients, encouraging particular contracts, supporting my professional development, had been designed not to advance my success, but to expand the intelligence value of our marriage to foreign espionage operations. Every major consulting contract I had secured, every security clearance I had attained, every classified project I had worked on during our marriage had been potentially compromised through Mike's systematic reporting to Ashley and her foreign intelligence handlers. The scope of the potential damage was staggering. Over 15 years, I had worked on cybersecurity assessments for critical infrastructure projects, defense contractor, security systems, and government operations that protected some of the most sensitive information in American national security planning. If foreign intelligence services had been systematically gathering information about these projects through my marriage, they could have developed comprehensive intelligence about American defensive capabilities, critical infrastructure, vulnerabilities, and strategic cybersecurity operations that would be invaluable for planning attacks against American interests. As I compiled this evidence, I realized that I needed professional assistance from someone with experience in counterintelligence operations and federal prosecution of espionage cases. This investigation had evolved beyond what I could handle alone, even with my extensive background in cybersecurity and digital forensics. I reached out to Rachel Williams, a former Department of Justice attorney who had specialized in national security prosecutions before establishing her own practice focused on cybersecurity law and government contracting issues. Rachel and I had worked together on several cases involving defense contractor security breaches, and I knew she had the security clearances and professional relationships necessary to coordinate with federal agencies on sensitive counterintelligence matters. Jennifer, Rachel said when I called her secure line at 6:00 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, "This is either a very early morning or a very late night for you." "Late night," I replied. "I need to meet with you today about a potential national security issue. Can you clear your schedule for a classified briefing?" The pause that followed told me Rachel understood immediately that this wasn't a routine consulting matter. "How serious are we talking?" "Systematic foreign intelligence, penetration, targeting defense contractor cybersecurity operations," I said. "Potentially 15 years of systematic compromise involving classified government projects." "Jesus, Jennifer, are you secure on this line?" "Yeah, completely secure. But we need to meet in person as soon as possible, and we'll need to coordinate with federal counterintelligence agencies." Rachel's voice shifted into the professional tone I remembered from our previous collaborations on sensitive cases. "My office at 9 o'clock. Use the private entrance. And Jennifer, assume you are under surveillance until we can establish a secure communication protocol." The warning about surveillance hadn't occurred to me, but it made perfect sense. If Mike and Ashley were part of a sophisticated foreign intelligence operation, they would have protocols for monitoring potential threats to their security. My investigation activities, no matter how carefully concealed, could have triggered counterintelligence measures designed to protect their operation. I spent the remaining hours before my meeting with Rachel implementing additional security measures to protect my investigation files and ensure that my evidence gathering couldn't be compromised or detected. This included creating multiple encrypted backups of all data, establishing secure communication channels with federal agencies, and developing contingency plans for protecting witnesses and evidence if the investigation was discovered before we could coordinate with law enforcement. The meeting with Rachel took place in her private conference room, a space that had been specifically designed for discussing classified information and sensitive legal matters. The walls contained signal-blocking materials that prevented electronic surveillance, and the room was regularly swept for listening devices by security contractors who specialized in government facilities. "Show me what you have," Rachel said, after activating the room's security protocols and ensuring that our conversation couldn't be monitored by hostile intelligence services. I presented 3 hours of evidence that documented the scope and sophistication of Mike and Ashley's operation. The network analysis showing systematic data theft. The financial records revealing funding sources that appeared to be connected to foreign intelligence services. The communication intercepts demonstrating coordination with foreign handlers and intelligence requirements. Rachel's expression grew increasingly grave as she reviewed the evidence. Jennifer, this is one of the most comprehensive foreign intelligence operations I've seen in 20 years of national security law practice. The damage assessment alone is going to take months. What are our options for federal coordination, I asked. Given the scope and sensitivity, we're looking at FBI counterintelligence, possibly CIA if there are international connections, and definitely NSA for the cybersecurity aspects, Rachel replied. But the challenge is going to be timing. If we move too quickly, we risk losing the opportunity to identify the full extent of their network. If we wait too long, they could complete their mission and disappear. We spent the next 2 hours developing a coordination strategy that would allow federal agencies to begin surveillance of Mike and Ashley while I continued gathering evidence about their intelligence network and foreign connections. This required careful timing to ensure that the investigation could document their activities without alerting them to the fact that they were under federal surveillance. The psychological challenge of returning home and maintaining normal interactions with Mike while coordinating a federal counterintelligence investigation was unlike anything I had experienced in my professional career. Every conversation, every shared meal, every moment of apparent domestic normalcy was now conducted under the knowledge that I was living with someone who had been systematically betraying American national security interests for our entire marriage. But the investigative protocols I had developed over years of cybersecurity work provided a framework for managing the emotional complexity while maintaining operational effectiveness. I treated each interaction with Mike as another piece of evidence to be documented and analyzed, maintaining the professional detachment that had made my reputation in a field that required clear thinking under extreme pressure. The most difficult challenge was maintaining the facade of the supportive pharmaceutical executive's wife while implementing a counterintelligence operation that could result in federal espionage charges carrying potential death sentences. Mike continued his routine of evening phone calls, weekend travel, and casual mentions of Ashley's professional development, apparently unaware that every detail was being recorded and analyzed by federal surveillance teams. 3 days after my meeting with Rachel, I received a secure communication from FBI Special Agent Maria Santos, who had been assigned to coordinate the federal investigation of Mike and Ashley's activities. Agent Santos had extensive experience with foreign intelligence operations targeting American technology companies and defense contractors, and she understood both the professional and personal challenges of investigating systematic betrayal by intimate partners. Mrs. Thompson, Agent Santos said during our first secure conversation, "I want you to know that the evidence you've compiled represents some of the most sophisticated individual counterintelligence work I've seen in 15 years with the Bureau. Your investigation has potentially prevented catastrophic damage to national security." The professional recognition was gratifying, but I was more interested in ensuring that Mike and Ashley's intelligence network could be completely dismantled before they could cause additional damage or escape federal prosecution. "What's our timeline for moving to active surveillance?" I asked. "We're implementing comprehensive coverage starting Monday," Agent Santos replied. "Phone intercepts, physical surveillance, financial monitoring, and digital forensic support. Your home security systems will be integrated with our surveillance network to ensure we capture every aspect of their operation." The coordination with federal agencies transformed my home into what was essentially a counterintelligence operations center disguised as a suburban executive residence. The sophisticated monitoring systems I had installed for my cybersecurity consulting work were enhanced with FBI surveillance equipment that could document every conversation, every phone call, and every data transfer that occurred within our house. But perhaps the most personally meaningful aspect of the federal coordination was the validation that my investigation had been conducted with the professional standards and legal protocols necessary to support federal prosecutions. Agent Santos confirmed that every piece of evidence I had gathered would be admissible in federal court and that my investigative methods had met the standards required for national security cases. "You've essentially conducted a one-person counterintelligence operation that rivals anything we could have accomplished with a full federal task force," Agent Santos told me during one of our secure briefings. Your technical capabilities combined with your access to the targets has created an opportunity to dismantle an intelligence network that we might never have discovered through conventional investigation. As the federal surveillance operation expanded to include Mike and Ashley's communications travel patterns and financial transactions, the scope of their intelligence network became even more clear. They were supporting a foreign operation that had been systematically targeting American cybersecurity capabilities for over a decade, using assets positioned throughout the technology industry and defense contracting community. But the investigation also revealed that their operation was approaching a critical phase that would require ending their American activities and potentially extracting to foreign countries where they would be protected from federal prosecution. The timeline for federal intervention was becoming urgent. 6 weeks after beginning my investigation, I had assembled what Agent Santos described as the most comprehensive counterintelligence evidence package in recent FBI history. The federal surveillance operation had documented systematic foreign intelligence activities that extended far beyond my initial suspicions about marital infidelity into a sophisticated espionage network that had been targeting American national security interests for over 15 years. But as I sat in my home office on a quiet Thursday evening, reviewing the final evidence reports that would support federal espionage prosecutions, I realized that the most challenging aspect of the entire operation was still ahead of me, maintaining operational security while Mike and Ashley completed their intelligence gathering mission under full federal surveillance. Agent Santos had made it clear that the timing of arrests and prosecutions would be critical to dismantling the entire foreign intelligence network that Mike and Ashley were supporting. Moving too quickly could allow other operatives to escape federal jurisdiction or destroy evidence that connected them to hostile foreign intelligence services. But waiting too long could enable them to complete their mission and extract to countries where they would be beyond the reach of American law enforcement. The solution was a carefully orchestrated operation that would allow Mike and Ashley to believe they were conducting routine intelligence gathering activities while federal agents documented every aspect of their operation with the evidence quality necessary to support prosecutions under federal espionage statutes. My role in this operation was both professionally challenging and personally devastating. I would need to maintain the facade of the unsuspecting suburban housewife while coordinating with federal counterintelligence agencies to ensure that every conversation, every document transfer, and every communication with foreign handlers was recorded with courtroom-quality evidence. The psychological preparation for this phase of the operation drew on every skill I had developed during my FBI years and my subsequent career in cybersecurity consulting. I had to treat Mike not as my husband of 15 years, but as a foreign intelligence operative whose activities posed a direct threat to American national security. Rachel Williams had arranged for me to work with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a psychologist who specialized in supporting federal agents and intelligence officers who were working undercover operations involving personal relationships. Dr. Mitchell understood both the professional requirements and the emotional challenges of maintaining operational effectiveness while investigating systematic betrayal by intimate partners. The most important thing to remember, Dr. Mitchell explained during one of our sessions, is that the Mike you married either never existed or ceased to exist the moment he decided to support foreign intelligence operations against American interests. The person you're living with now is essentially a foreign operative using your marriage as cover for espionage activities. The reframing was helpful professionally, but emotionally devastating in ways that required constant management. Every shared meal, every conversation about weekend plans, every moment of apparent domestic normalcy was now conducted under the knowledge that I was participating in a federal counterintelligence operation that would likely result in Mike spending the rest of his life in federal prison. But the alternative, allowing him to continue compromising American national security, was unacceptable both professionally and personally. My security clearances and access to classified projects created obligations that extended far beyond my marriage vows. The operational timeline called for maintaining normal household routines while federal surveillance teams documented Mike and Ashley's activities over a 6-week period that would allow them to complete their current intelligence gathering mission while creating irrefutable evidence of their foreign intelligence connections. This meant continuing to travel for consulting engagements, attending pharmaceutical industry social events, and maintaining the social relationships that had provided cover for their operation. But every activity was now coordinated with federal agents to ensure that Mike and Ashley's responses to various situations could be monitored and recorded. The most challenging aspects of the operation were the evening conversations that had become Mike's routine over the past several months. His phone calls, which I now knew were coordination sessions with Ashley and potentially foreign intelligence handlers, continued for hours each night while federal surveillance teams recorded every word. I had to maintain my routine of working late in my home office on computer consulting projects, while actually coordinating with federal agents about evidence analysis and operational planning. The cover story was perfect. Mike had always dismissed my work as harmless technical consulting that kept me busy, but posed no threat to his activities. But the irony was that my harmless technical consulting had created the sophisticated surveillance capabilities that were documenting his espionage activities with the evidence quality necessary to support federal death penalty prosecutions. 3 weeks before the planned arrest operation, Ashley sent me a message through Instagram that immediately escalated the timeline for federal intervention. The message contained 5 photographs that Ashley clearly intended as a devastating revelation about her relationship with Mike, designed to hurt me emotionally and potentially destroy our marriage. What Ashley didn't realize was that her photographs provided the final pieces of evidence federal prosecutors needed to demonstrate that foreign intelligence operatives had been conducting systematic espionage activities in the home of an American cybersecurity professional with access to classified government projects. The photographs showed Ashley and Mike in intimate situations that would certainly be painful for any spouse to discover. But from a counterintelligence perspective, they provided timestamp proof that foreign intelligence operatives had been physically present in a location where classified materials were stored and processed. More importantly, the photographs had been taken using devices that were connected to communication networks, monitored by foreign intelligence services, creating digital evidence that could be traced to hostile foreign entities through network analysis and signal intelligence. "This is it," Agent Santos told me during an emergency secure briefing the morning after Ashley's message. "We have everything we need for federal espionage prosecutions, and the photographs provide proof of operational coordination that extends the timeline to include death penalty considerations." The arrest operation was scheduled for the following Thursday morning, timed to coincide with what federal surveillance had determined would be Ashley's final intelligence gathering session at our house. Mike had arranged for me to travel to Houston for a consulting engagement, creating what he believed would be an opportunity for comprehensive document collection without the risk of discovery by someone with sophisticated technical capabilities. But instead of traveling to Houston, I would be coordinating with federal agents to document the final phase of an espionage operation that had been systematically compromising American national security for over 15 years. The personal preparation for watching my husband and his intelligence partner be arrested for federal espionage charges required emotional compartmentalization skills that extended beyond anything I had learned in my professional training. Dummy, Mitchell had prepared me for the psychological impact of seeing Mike in federal custody, but nothing could really prepare someone for watching 15 years of marriage transform into evidence exhibits in a federal death penalty case. "Remember, Doctor," Mitchell told me during our final session before the arrest operation, "you didn't destroy your marriage. You discovered that your marriage had been destroyed 15 years ago when Mike decided to support foreign intelligence operations. Everything since then has been an elaborate deception designed to exploit your security clearances and professional relationships." The night before the arrest operation, I lay in bed listening to Mike's breathing and processing the realization that this would be the last time I would ever share a bed with my husband. By tomorrow evening, he would be in federal custody facing espionage charges that could result in execution for treason against the United States. But I had made my choice weeks ago when I discovered the scope of their intelligence operation. My obligations to American national security outweighed my personal feelings about the end of my marriage. Mike and Ashley had been systematically betraying interests that extended far beyond our personal relationship into areas that affected the safety and security of millions of Americans. As I prepared for what Agent Santos had described as the final phase of one of the most significant counterintelligence operations in recent FBI history, I realized that Ashley's photographs had been intended to devastate me emotionally, but had instead provided the final evidence necessary to protect American national security from one of the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operations in recent decades. The photos she had never expected were the federal surveillance images that would document her arrest for espionage against the United States of America. Tomorrow, the investigation would transition from evidence gathering to law enforcement action. And I would transform from a betrayed wife conducting a personal investigation into a key witness in federal espionage prosecutions that could reshape American counterintelligence operations for decades to come. The confrontation Ashley and Mike thought they were orchestrating would instead become their complete and permanent destruction under the weight of federal law enforcement capabilities that they had never suspected were documenting their every move. They had severely underestimated exactly who they were dealing with, and tomorrow they would discover the consequences of conducting foreign intelligence operations under the surveillance of someone who specialized in exactly the kind of investigation that would ensure their convictions and protect American national security from similar penetration in the future. The Thursday morning that would forever change the trajectory of American counterintelligence operations began with the same domestic routine that had characterized our mornings for 15 years. Mike's alarm at 6:15, the automatic coffee brewing, and the sound of the Austin American-Statesman hitting our front porch with practiced precision. But as I lay in our bed, listening to Mike's shower and preparing for what Agent Santos had described as the most significant federal arrest operation of the decade, I knew that everything about our carefully constructed suburban life was about to be revealed as an elaborate intelligence operation that had been systematically betraying the American national security interests. "Good morning, beautiful," Mike said as he emerged from the bathroom, his silver hair perfectly styled and his face wearing the confident expression of a man who believed his secrets were absolutely secure. He leaned down to kiss my forehead with the casual affection that had once meant everything to me, but now felt like the final performance in a 15-year deception. "Good morning," I replied, managing the warm smile that had become as automatic as breathing after years of pharmaceutical industry social events. "Are you ready for your big presentation today?" Mike's expression shifted to the mixture of professional pride and nervous energy that always preceded important business meetings. "The Morrison contract expansion should be straightforward, but you know how these pharmaceutical executives can be about implementation details." What Mike didn't know was that his routine business meeting had been carefully orchestrated by federal agents to create the perfect opportunity for documenting the final phase of his intelligence operation while ensuring that Ashley would be present for simultaneous arrest on federal espionage charges. "I'm sure everything will go perfectly," I said, the words carrying multiple layers of meaning that only I understood. "You've been preparing for this opportunity for a very long time." Indeed, he had been preparing, just not for the business success he imagined. As Mike left for what he believed would be another successful day of pharmaceutical sales and intelligence gathering, I began implementing the final phase of a counterintelligence operation that had been 6 weeks in development. My supposed consulting trip to Houston had been canceled, but Mike would only discover that fact when federal agents informed him during his arrest. I made my way to my home office, but instead of the routine checking of emails and client communications that Mike expected, I opened secure communication channels with FBI Special Agent Maria Santos and began coordinating the arrest operation that would dismantle one of the most sophisticated foreign intelligence networks in recent American history. Primary target is en route to the office. I reported through the encrypted communication system that federal agents had installed in my monitoring equipment. Secondary target should arrive at the residence within the next hour for the final intelligence gathering session. "Copy that," Agent Santos replied. "Federal surveillance teams are in position. Arrest warrants have been issued under the Espionage Act with additional charges pending review by national security prosecutors. Are you ready for this?" The question carried weight beyond simple operational readiness. Agent Santos understood that I was about to watch my husband of 15 years be arrested for federal crimes that could result in execution for treason against the United States. I'm ready, I replied, though no amount of professional training could truly prepare someone for the complete destruction of everything they had believed about their personal life. By 9:30 a.m., Ashley's silver BMW had pulled into our circular driveway with the confidence of someone who believed she was conducting routine intelligence gathering under the cover of a romantic relationship. Federal surveillance teams had documented her route, her communications with foreign handlers, and her preparation for what she expected would be comprehensive collection of classified materials while I was supposedly traveling for business. What Ashley didn't realize was that she was walking into a carefully orchestrated federal arrest operation that had been documenting her espionage activities for weeks, while she believed she was successfully evading detection by someone she considered a naive suburban housewife. The irony was perfect. A foreign intelligence operative with professional training in counterintelligence was about to be arrested by federal agents whose surveillance operation had been coordinated by the very person she had been targeting for exploitation. I watched through my concealed monitoring systems as Ashley used her own key to enter our house. Evidence of the systematic access that foreign intelligence operatives had been granted to a residence where classified government materials were processed and stored. Her movements were confident and efficient, reflecting the professional training that had made her valuable to foreign intelligence services targeting American cybersecurity capabilities. But every step she took was being recorded by federal surveillance equipment that would provide irrefutable evidence of foreign intelligence penetration of an American home containing classified national security materials. Ashley's first actions upon entering the house followed the counterintelligence protocols she had been trained to implement: electronic sweeps for surveillance devices, signal jamming to disrupt potential monitoring systems, and systematic searches for classified documents that could be photographed and transmitted to foreign intelligence handlers. The professional quality of her operational security measures confirmed everything federal investigators had suspected about her background and training. This wasn't amateur corporate espionage. This was sophisticated foreign intelligence work conducted by someone with extensive professional preparation. But Ashley had made one critical miscalculation. She had assumed that the monitoring systems she needed to evade were standard residential security equipment rather than military-grade surveillance capabilities operated by someone with decades of experience in counterintelligence operations. Every electronic sweep she conducted was being monitored by federal agents. Every signal jamming device she deployed was being analyzed and countered by equipment that represented the cutting edge of American surveillance technology. Every classified document she photographed was being recorded by cameras that would provide federal prosecutors with evidence of systematic theft of materials affecting national security. The federal arrest operation began at exactly 10:47 a.m., timed to coincide with Ashley's deepest penetration of classified materials, storage areas, and her most vulnerable position for avoiding detection or destroying evidence. Federal agents, this is the FBI. The announcement echoed through our house with the authority that comes from agents trained in high-risk arrest operations involving potentially armed foreign intelligence operatives. Ashley's reaction revealed the extent of her professional training. Instead of panic or confusion, she immediately began implementing protocols designed to protect her intelligence network and minimize the damage from her capture. Her first actions were attempts to activate emergency communication devices that would alert foreign handlers to her compromise, followed by systematic destruction of evidence that could implicate other members of her espionage network. But federal agents had anticipated exactly these responses. Ashley's communication devices had been electronically isolated to prevent contact with foreign intelligence services, and her attempts to destroy evidence were being recorded as additional charges of obstruction of justice and destruction of federal evidence. Ashley Chen and Agent Santos announced as federal agents secured the scene, "You are under arrest for espionage against the United States conspiracy to commit treason, theft of classified materials, and violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act." The formal reading of charges under federal espionage statutes carried weight that extended far beyond routine criminal arrests. These were charges that could result in life imprisonment or execution for activities that had systematically compromised American national security interests. Ashley's professional composure began to crack as she realized the scope of the federal investigation that had been documenting her activities. "I want to contact the embassy," she demanded, invoking diplomatic protections that confirmed her connection to foreign government intelligence services. "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent," Agent Santos continued, following protocols for arrests involving foreign intelligence operatives who might attempt to claim diplomatic immunity or other international legal protections. Meanwhile, the second phase of the arrest operation was unfolding at MedTech's corporate headquarters, where Mike was attending what he believed was a routine business meeting about pharmaceutical sales expansion. "I monitored the arrest through secure communication channels that allowed me to observe the systematic destruction of Mike's carefully constructed professional life without being physically present for the emotional devastation of watching my husband be charged with federal crimes." Michael Thompson, Special Agent David Park announced as Mike sat in MedTech's executive conference room, surrounded by pharmaceutical colleagues who had gathered for what they expected would be a routine business presentation. "You are under arrest for espionage against the United States conspiracy to commit treason and violations of federal laws governing the protection of classified information." The shock in the conference room was immediate and complete. Mike's pharmaceutical colleagues watched in stunned silence as federal agents secured him with handcuffs and began the formal arrest procedures that would transform him from a successful pharmaceutical executive into a federal defendant facing potential execution for treason. Mike's reaction was less professional than Ashley's, but equally revealing. His immediate response was desperate attempts to contact attorneys and assertions that federal agents had made some terrible mistake that could be resolved through proper legal channels. "I don't understand what's happening," Mike said, his voice carrying the panic of someone whose carefully constructed deception was collapsing under federal law enforcement scrutiny. "I'm a pharmaceutical sales executive. I don't have access to any classified information." But federal agents were prepared with evidence that documented 15 years of systematic theft of classified materials through Mike's exploitation of his marriage to a cybersecurity professional with extensive government security clearances. "Mr. Thompson," Agent Park replied, "federal investigators have documented comprehensive evidence of your participation in foreign intelligence operations targeting American national security interests. You will have opportunities to discuss your cooperation with federal prosecutors after you have been properly processed." The mention of cooperation with federal prosecutors was particularly devastating, as it implied that federal investigators understood Mike's role in a larger intelligence network and were prepared to offer reduced sentences in exchange for information about other foreign intelligence operatives. As news of the arrest spread through Austin's pharmaceutical and technology communities, the social implications of the espionage charges began to affect every aspect of Mike's carefully constructed professional and personal life. MedTech Solutions immediately suspended Mike from all corporate positions and began their own internal investigation to determine the scope of compromised company information and potential liability for regulatory violations. The pharmaceutical industry's extensive security protocols meant that any employee charged with espionage would face immediate termination and industry-wide blacklisting. Our social circle within Austin's pharmaceutical and technology communities reacted with shock and immediate distancing from any association with federal espionage charges. Country club memberships, charity board positions, and social relationships that had taken years to develop disappeared within hours of news reports about the arrests. But the most personally devastating aspect of Mike's collapse was his reaction when federal agents informed him that his wife had been the source of the evidence that led to his arrest. "Jennifer," Mike said, his voice carrying disbelief that someone he had dismissed as technologically naive could have detected and documented his sophisticated intelligence operation. "Jennifer doesn't know anything about this. She just does computer consulting for small businesses." The federal agent's response must have been particularly crushing. "Mr. Thompson, your wife is one of the most respected cybersecurity professionals in the country with extensive experience in counterintelligence operations and federal law enforcement. Every aspect of your intelligence activities has been documented with evidence that will support your conviction under federal espionage statutes." Learning that the woman he had been exploiting for 15 years possessed exactly the professional capabilities necessary to destroy his intelligence operation represented the complete collapse of every assumption that had guided his espionage activities. Mike had spent our entire marriage believing he was successfully manipulating someone with limited technical knowledge and no understanding of intelligence operations. Instead, he had been conducting systematic espionage under the surveillance of someone who specialized in exactly the kind of investigation that would document his activities with federal courtroom quality evidence. The irony was perfect in devastating. Mike's success in dismissing my professional capabilities had prevented him from recognizing that he was living with someone who could detect and prosecute his espionage activities more effectively than most federal agents. The federal prosecution of Mike Thompson and Ashley Chen became the most significant espionage case in recent American legal history, with implications that extended far beyond their individual crimes into comprehensive reforms of how America protects its cybersecurity capabilities from foreign intelligence penetration. 6 months after their arrests, both Mike and Ashley had been convicted on multiple federal charges under the Espionage Act, with sentences that reflected the extraordinary scope of damage they had caused to American national security interests. Ashley received life imprisonment without possibility of parole after federal prosecutors demonstrated that she had been a deep-cover foreign intelligence operative whose systematic theft of classified information had compromised cybersecurity operations, protecting critical infrastructure defense systems and government communications networks across the United States. The evidence I had compiled documenting her intelligence gathering activities provided the foundation for federal prosecutors to demonstrate that Ashley's operation represented one of the most sophisticated and damaging foreign intelligence penetrations in modern American history. Mike received a sentence of 45 years in federal prison after cooperating with prosecutors to identify other potential foreign intelligence assets and providing detailed information about the recruitment and operational methods used by foreign intelligence services to target American cybersecurity professionals. His cooperation reduced what could have been a death sentence for treason, but federal prosecutors made clear that the scope of his intelligence activities and the damage to national security ensured that he would spend the rest of his productive life in federal custody. The damage assessment conducted by national security agencies determined that Mike and Ashley's espionage operation had compromised cybersecurity information worth potentially hundreds of billions of dollars in defensive capabilities, requiring fundamental changes to American cybersecurity strategies and emergency upgrades to critical infrastructure protection systems. But the investigation also revealed that my detection and documentation of their activities had prevented even greater damage by enabling federal authorities to identify and disrupt their intelligence network before they could complete their mission and escape to foreign countries where they would have been protected from American prosecution. The professional recognition I received for conducting what FBI Director Sarah Chen described as one of the most sophisticated individual counterintelligence operations in Bureau history transformed my consulting practice from a successful cybersecurity firm into one of the most sought-after national security consulting organizations in the country. Cybersecurity solutions expanded to include contracts with every major government cybersecurity agency, defense contractors working on the most sensitive classified projects, and international allies seeking to enhance their own counterintelligence capabilities against foreign intelligence threats. The work became more demanding and complex, but also more meaningful. Instead of simply helping corporate clients protect their data from routine cyber threats, I was now involved in protecting American national security infrastructure from systematic attack by foreign adversaries seeking to undermine our defensive capabilities and compromise critical systems. The personal transformation was equally profound. The woman who had once played the role of a quietly supportive pharmaceutical executive's wife had emerged as one of the most respected counterintelligence professionals in American cybersecurity. The house in Westlake Hills underwent complete renovation and security upgrades that transformed it from the site of a foreign intelligence operation into a secure facility that met federal standards for protecting classified materials and conducting sensitive government consulting work. The home office where I had first discovered evidence of Mike's espionage activities became the headquarters for cybersecurity operations that protected critical infrastructure, government communications, and defense systems from the most sophisticated foreign threats. The bedroom where Ashley had photographed herself with Mike was redesigned as a personal sanctuary that represented independence, professional success, and the resilience required to survive systematic betrayal while emerging stronger and more capable. But perhaps the most meaningful change was the development of personal relationships with colleagues who understood both the technical challenges of cybersecurity work and the emotional complexities of discovering that intimate relationships can be exploited for intelligence purposes. Rachel Williams, who had provided legal counsel during the initial phases of the investigation, became both a close friend and professional collaborator. Her expertise in cybersecurity law and her understanding of the personal challenges faced by intelligence professionals created a friendship that extended beyond professional cooperation. Agent Maria Santos, who had coordinated the federal investigation of Mike and Ashley's espionage activities, remained both a professional colleague and personal friend. Our shared experience in counterintelligence operations and our mutual understanding of the unique challenges faced by women in cybersecurity and law enforcement created a bond that transcended normal professional relationships. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the psychologist, who had helped me process the emotional challenges of discovering that my marriage had been essentially a 15-year foreign intelligence operation, provided ongoing support that enabled me to maintain both professional effectiveness and personal resilience in demanding and sometimes dangerous work. The dating landscape proved challenging initially, as men often approached relationships with someone who had detected and documented a major foreign intelligence operation with a mixture of fascination and intimidation that complicated personal connections. But I discovered that the experience of surviving systematic betrayal and emerging professionally stronger had provided clarity about the kind of personal relationships that were worth pursuing and the importance of maintaining independence and professional identity regardless of romantic circumstances. 2 years after Mike's conviction, I met David Park, a former Navy intelligence officer who had transitioned into cybersecurity consulting after completing his military service. David understood both the technical challenges of protecting sensitive information and the personal costs that could accompany success in national security work. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully, built on mutual respect for each other's professional capabilities and shared understanding of the unique challenges faced by people whose work involved protecting American interests from sophisticated foreign threats. David's background in military intelligence operations provided him with realistic expectations about the demands of cybersecurity work and the importance of maintaining professional obligations, even when they conflicted with personal preferences. The wedding was a small, private ceremony attended by close friends and colleagues who understood the significance of finding personal happiness after surviving the kind of systematic betrayal that had characterized my marriage to Mike. The financial security that resulted from the professional advancement and legal settlements related to the espionage case provided independence and opportunities to focus on meaningful work rather than simply lucrative projects. The civil litigation against MedTech Solutions for their role in enabling foreign intelligence access to sensitive pharmaceutical industry information resulted in a settlement that reflected the extraordinary personal and professional costs of being targeted for exploitation by foreign intelligence services. But more importantly, the professional recognition and security clearance enhancements that resulted from my role in detecting Operation Digital Deception opened career opportunities that would have been impossible to achieve through conventional cybersecurity consulting work. The speaking engagements at cybersecurity conferences, government training facilities, and academic institutions created opportunities to share lessons learned from detecting sophisticated espionage operations while building professional relationships with colleagues working on similar challenges in protecting sensitive information from foreign exploitation. The mentoring relationships I developed with young cybersecurity professionals, particularly women entering the field, provided opportunities to share both technical expertise and personal insights about maintaining professional identity and personal resilience in work that often involved detecting sophisticated deception and systematic threats. The charitable activities that became possible through financial security focused on supporting educational opportunities for students interested in cybersecurity careers and providing resources for organizations that help victims of espionage and systematic deception recover from traumatic experiences. 5 years after Ashley's midnight message, I was invited to address a joint session of congressional intelligence committees about lessons learned from Operation Digital Deception and recommendations for protecting American cybersecurity capabilities from foreign intelligence penetration. Standing in the Capitol building, presenting analysis that would influence national security policy for decades to come, I reflected on the journey from that night when I had received 5 photographs that Ashley intended would devastate my marriage and destroy my personal stability. Instead, her attempt to hurt me emotionally with evidence of her relationship with Mike had provided the final motivation needed to complete a counterintelligence investigation that protected American national security infrastructure from one of the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operations in modern history. The photos she never expected were the surveillance images that documented her arrest by federal agents, the evidence exhibits that supported her conviction for espionage against the United States, and the professional recognition photographs that marked my transformation from a betrayed wife into one of the most respected counterintelligence professionals in American cybersecurity. Ashley had thought she was ending a marriage with provocative photographs that would emotionally destroy a naive suburban wife. Instead, she had provided evidence for a counterintelligence investigation that made her one of the most significant espionage convictions in American legal history. Mike had believed he could exploit his wife's cybersecurity expertise and security clearances for personal gain while maintaining the facade of a successful marriage. Instead, he had created a comprehensive record of espionage activities that resulted in federal convictions and prison sentences that would define the remainder of his life. The foreign intelligence services that had invested years in developing Operation Digital Deception lost not only their operational assets, but also the comprehensive cybersecurity intelligence they had been systematically collecting through their penetration of American technology and defense capabilities. But perhaps most importantly, the systematic betrayal that had characterized my marriage to Mike had been transformed into capabilities that protected other cybersecurity professionals and critical national security interests from similar exploitation. The midnight message that Ashley had sent 5 years earlier, intended to devastate me emotionally and destroy my marriage, had instead provided the catalyst for detecting and disrupting a foreign intelligence network that had been systematically compromising American cybersecurity capabilities for over 15 years. Her attempt to hurt me with evidence of her relationship with Mike became the final piece of evidence needed to protect American national security from one of the most sophisticated foreign intelligence operations in recent history. The photos she never expected were not just surveillance images documenting federal arrests and espionage convictions, but also the professional recognition of photographs, the wedding images with David, and the official portraits that accompanied senior government consulting appointments. They represented the transformation of personal betrayal into professional purpose, the conversion of systematic deception into enhanced defensive capabilities, and the evolution from victimization to leadership in protecting others from similar exploitation. As I concluded my congressional testimony and prepared to return to Austin for another day of protecting American cybersecurity infrastructure from foreign threats, I realized that Ashley's 5 photographs had indeed changed everything, just not in the way she had intended. Instead of destroying my life, they had provided the evidence that enabled me to build a life of greater meaning, deeper purpose, and more significant impact than anything I could have achieved if my marriage to Mike had continued unchanged. The midnight message that was meant to end my story had instead become the beginning of a new chapter that was far more meaningful than anything that had come before. And that, dear friends, is how 5 photographs that were meant to destroy a woman's life instead became the evidence that protected our entire nation's security. Jennifer's story reminds us that strength often comes disguised as quietness, that intelligence can be hidden behind humble smiles, and that sometimes the most devastating revenge is simply allowing truth to unfold with perfect timing. Her husband Mike and his accomplice Ashley thought they were so clever conducting their elaborate scheme under the nose of someone they saw as just a supportive housewife. They never imagined that the woman they dismissed was actually one of the most capable investigators in the country. But perhaps the most beautiful part of this story isn't the justice that was served, though Mike's 45-year sentence and Ashley's life imprisonment certainly fit their crimes. It's how Jennifer transformed her greatest betrayal into her greatest triumph, building a new life of purpose, respect, and genuine love with someone who valued her true capabilities. Sometimes the universe has a way of ensuring that people who abuse trust and underestimate others face consequences they never saw coming. And sometimes, just sometimes, the quiet woman in the corner turns out to be the most dangerous person in the room. Thank you for joining me tonight. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of your own hidden strengths, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the power of a woman who knows exactly who she is.